pride ourselves in our hot breakfast, so I'm glad you're enjoying it. I want to welcome everyone. I just want to say a few words. I'm going to turn it over to Teresa Belisle. But I want to welcome all of you to the Edge in Education. I was just chatting with Garfield about the fact that we've been doing this kind of thing with parents probably now, I think, for about 7-8 years. It used to be called the parent focus groups. And when we were meeting with some parents about that, they said, you know, it's a really bland name for a meeting. And they're the ones who suggested, how about Edge in Education? And that's what we've adopted ever since. And we think it really does position these kinds of meetings. It's not simply about let's get together and talk about education. It's about where is education going? Where is learning? Where's the whole field of education and learning going? And that's why we do this. Whenever we've got experts coming to the school, they not only work with faculty and with other educators, they're working with parents. Because if we're going to continue to move in the direction we're trying to move in as a school and to be really relevant to the kids, and as the theme of this series is called, is engaging our learners, then we need to be together. We need to understand where the school is going, and we need to hear your voice as well. So that's why we do this and why you're here. So I'm sure we're going to have an engaging and interesting morning, and I'll turn it over to Teresa Belisle to introduce Garfield.
Thank you, Arnie. Hello, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Teresa Belisle, the Director of Learning, Research, and Development, which basically means we're always trying to figure out how to become even greater in what we do, the learning that we do here at ISP. We welcome back Garfield Gini-Newman. We're fortunate. This is the third year that we've been able to work with him. We actually found about Garfield through one of our teachers in the upper school had seen him at a conference. And Garfield is a professor at OAZ. OAZ is the Ontario Institute of the Studies in Education, did I get that right? At the University of Toronto. And Garfield has won Excellence in Teaching History awards. He's written many textbooks, and more of his recent work has really been around critical thinking, okay? And so you know that that's a central part of who we are at ISP and what we're trying to develop as a competency. So we first read his book here at ISP, and then we invited him to come and work with us in trying to make that a reality. All of us have an idea about critical thinking, engaging kids so that they think deeply. Doing it is another thing, right? It's a very complex. And so this is little bit by little bit, we try to work on this. So we're thrilled that Garfield's back. He's been working with the teachers the last couple of days. We had different sessions. We had very specific sessions for departments. We had opt-in sessions after school. He worked with our social studies department. So he's done a lot of different work. He'll work with principals today, and we'll wrap up at the end of the day. So we're thrilled that, again, he's able to do a session with you around our theme of engaged learners this year. So I'm going to turn it over to Garfield.
Thank you. Thanks. So I thought my two images kind of captured the yes example and the no example. And I always love this picture, this poor little boy, just not what we want in schools. Teresa, in her comments, I mentioned the focus on critical thinking, and I think there are reasons why we really need in schools and education to move beyond compliance, that just learning because someone told you something, to deeper understanding, because there's all kinds of media out there, and you can see some of the examples I've just pulled that are questionable, that we need to be skeptical about. And in fact, I want to pick up on the diamond shreddies, which I didn't know this till I saw this video, but this is a uniquely Canadian, UK, and I think New Zealand thing. I just want to show you this piece. Just let me launch the video here.
This is the most perfect case of creating intangible added value without changing the product in the slightest. Shreddies is a strange square whole grain cereal only available in New Zealand, Canada and Britain. It's Kraft's peculiar way of rewarding loyalty to the crown. In working out how you could relaunch Shreddies, he came up with this.
Shreddies are supposed to be square.
Have any of these diamond shapes gonna...
New
Diamond Shreddy cereal. The same 100% whole grain wheat in a delicious diamond shape.
Now, I'm not sure this is the most perfect example of intangible value creation. All it requires is photons, neurons, and a great idea to create this thing. And I have to say, it's a work of genius, but naturally you can't do this kind of thing without a little bit of market research.
So Shreddies is actually introducing a new product, which is something very exciting for them. So they're introducing new diamond Shreddies, which is interesting. So I just want you to look at that box there. So I just want to get your first impressions when you see that, and you see the diamond Shreddy box there.
Are they square?
I'm a little bit confused.
They look like squares.
It's all in the appearance, but it's kind of like thinking about a 6 or a 9, like a 6. You flip it over, it looks like a 9, but a 6 is very different from a 9. And M and a W, exactly.
Actually, when you don't see it, like when I sat there, I think you just look like you turn on its end, but when you see it like that, it's more interesting. Like it.
Just try both of them. Get a square one there first. What did you prefer first of all?
First one.
The first one.
So why we need to have our kids thinking, challenging, questioning a little bit more. I wanted to just ask you, you'll notice at your table you have a large sheet of paper, and I'm going to ask you to do a short activity with me. We're going to use a placemat activity, and I'm going to ask you if the person whose birthday is coming up next could take a marker. So if you could just take a minute at your table, whose birthday is coming up next? I want that person to take a marker, and you're going to create the placemat. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds to figure out who's going to draw it. When I ask you to start, I'm going to give you 2 minutes, and in that 2 minutes, there should be no talking. I want you to write as many things in your space that you can remember when you were a student. What helped learning stick? What helped you remember? I want you to think back, when I was a student, what was the kind of learning that you experienced? What do you remember from the past? Was it a field trip? Like what really got learning to help you remember it? Just write down all the things you can think of that you remember from your learning. So 2 minutes, start writing. Remember, not talk about it, just write as many ideas as you can come up with. All right, our next step, I'm going to ask you to share at your table. And how I want you to do this, I'm going to ask a person to start. You read your list. Please don't discuss them, just read your list and then move clockwise around. So you'll read yours, and then the person on your left will read theirs, and we'll just go around the table. Could the person with the shortest hair begin to read and then move around? Okay, now, I'm just going to bring you back together for a moment. So you had a moment to think on your own. You've shared. Now your real challenge. I want you to place in the center the 4 most important factors that you've shared as a group. So now you have to decide, of everything you have shared, which 4 seem to be the most important factors that help learning really stick. So now you have to decide which ones you're going to not list, which ones you're going to put in the middle. Could I get one person in your table to volunteer to write the list? If you could do that, and then talk and see if you can agree on what 4 go in the middle. Okay, so I want to bring us back together. I just want to let you know, we'll, if we have time, if we were doing this in a class with children, what we often do, for example, I've done this exercise inviting children to think about what makes a difference in our quality of life. And the children will have to come up with factors, and then we reduce, and then as a class, we see if we can arrive at a consensus that what are the most important factors ensuring that we have a high quality of life, and we might look into those. Because of the size of the group and limited time, I'm going to suggest that I'm going to just, some things I observed, and perhaps we can post these later, and as we mingle later, have a look at what others had to say. Fascinating to me, though, is how many of you had the teacher as an important, whether the teacher was passionate about it, that the teacher makes a difference. One table had, I thought, a lovely juxtaposition against the teacher, but the chance for individual learning to apply it was kind of a nice, that passionate teacher, but the room for kids. I think you guys were talking about a passion project in a similar way. Can we just get a few just to toss out something that sat near the top for you that I haven't mentioned? Writing. Just when I record it, I tend to remember it better. Whereas you guys had reading at the top, I think, right? Or sorry, number 2. Anything else that we haven't just thrown out quickly there? What else would you? Sorry? Visual. Seeing. How many of you had some kind of a connection to authenticity, relevance to the world? Like some kind of connection, okay? Okay. I want you to think about this. We're going to dig into engagement a little bit. Keep these in mind, and I want to just share with you. This is a study by David Chernoff, who was a student. There's a professor in the United States called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote a book called Flow. And the idea of flow is when you're in a state of flow, time seems to just fly by. So if you're doing something you're really passionate about, have you been involved in that where you're just, wow, where'd the time go? Right? By the way, when you were doing this, and I'm trying to pull you back, you're in a state of flow. Kids who are involved in learning, that's so the day ends before they know it. By the way, it could be writing an exam and it's 3 hours and you thought it was going to feel like forever, and next thing you know, you're 2.5 hours in, and because you were so focused. So Chernoff wanted to take this notion of flow and take it into a school setting and say, what is student engagement? And I'm going to show you what the study found. By the way, the study was conducted by giving students a wristband device, and that wristband would buzz on their wrist randomly. Any time of night or day, they'd get a little buzz, and they had to stop, and whatever they were doing, they had to go to their journal and record how engaged they were at that moment. So they might have been hanging out with their friends or doing their homework or sitting in class or watching TV. Whatever you're doing, when you get a little buzz, pause and record your level of engagement. Okay? The children were given a definition for engagement. I'm not going to tell you that. I want you to tell me what defined engagement based on the results. Here's the first thing they found in the study. They found that students were more engaged in arts and tech classes than they were in what we would call academic classes. Is that a surprise to anyone? They were more engaged in arts and tech than traditional academic. I'm seeing many of you say not surprised. I'm going to get you to talk about this after I show you a second one. They found that students were more engaged in science than they were in math. Many of you are agreeing. Can you just take a minute at your table? What does that tell you about what it means to be engaged? Why are kids more engaged in arts and tech? Why are they more engaged in science than math? What does that suggest that it means to be engaged? Just take a minute at your table, if you would. What does that suggest to you? Why are kids more engaged in arts and tech? Why are they more engaged in science and math? Do you want to start us off? How come? It's hands-on. Okay? So another reason. Why science more than math?
We also felt because science you can see the real life applications, but math, the young going to the supermarket and adding and subtracting, kids don't really get that math is useful outside of the
Okay, so the science has that more tangible connection quickly. It's hands-on. Okay, I'm going to show you the next one. And before I do, you may have noticed in the introduction that my background when I was in the classroom was teaching history, so this broke my heart. Kids are more engaged in math than they are in history or social science. In fact, history came in at the very bottom. It was the least engaging for kids. So I'm going to ask you why, but you have to be kind because I wrote several of the texts kids use and I taught it. Why are kids least engaged in history and social science? Just take a minute again at your table. What does that tell us about what it means to be engaged? All right, being kind. Why? Why is history the least engaging? And just choose your words kindly. So I don't feel like I wasted 15 years. Why is history coming in at the bottom?
Because we said the kids couldn't relate to it.
So, I mean, if you couldn't relate to the math, the history is even hard. When am I going to use this? Okay, another.
I think it's more proactive action, like kids doing something. In history, you have to be kind of memorized, I don't know.
Okay.
And then arts and tech, it's
The doing. You're doing. Yeah. By the way, would you mind sharing?
We were discussing here how we feel history should be presented as an argument. You know, there should be opposing sides. How can this be interpreted? You know, it's a wonderful opportunity for critical thinking. But I believe, just thinking back to my own education, it wasn't presented in that way. It was a kind of, this is red.
Well, if I could just pick up on that just for a moment. Think about even how we talk about math versus history. You do math, and you learn about history. Math is a doing subject. If I ask a math teacher, how long do you teach math before kids have to do it, try it out? What do you think a math teacher would tell me? How long do you teach math? Yeah, I get 0 to 15 minutes has been max. It's, you show a little bit, kids try it. Did any of you experience a history class where you learned about history for 3 weeks before you did anything with it? Right? It can be a passive subject. Imagine if history was a do subject, not a learn about subject, where it's always about constructing an argument, engaged in the doing, but if it is a lot of learning about, it becomes passive, right? By the way, I would argue math and phys ed are more alike than math and history. Right? Phys ed, you are doing. Right? Yeah. Art, music, you're doing. By the way, history can be that. It just too often isn't that. Right? So how do we bump that up? I'm going to show you one last piece. This surprised me. They found out the kids are more engaged writing a test than watching a movie in class. That isn't to say that they didn't like the movie. They may have said, yeah, I enjoyed the movie, but you asked me if I was engaged. And they were more engaged writing a test than watching a movie. Again, just give you a minute. We'll keep this in short. Why is that the case? Why are kids more engaged writing a test than watching a movie? Just give you a minute to share a thought on that. Okay, so explain to me why is writing a test more engaging? First of all, I want to reverse my question a little bit. What does this suggest to us that engaging does not necessarily mean? Enjoyment. Yeah, engaging is not have more fun. And I want to be careful of this because in education, there's lots of talk we need more engaging classrooms. That doesn't mean we need to have more fun necessarily. It doesn't mean, well, we should do more fun activities. If the fun activities still passive, I liked watching that movie. I enjoyed it a lot, but it was passive. Right? So engagement is not just have more fun. So why are they more engaged writing a test?
You feel under time pressure, don't you? Whereas the movie, it feels like, oh great, this is kind of a lesson off. I'll just go into my...
It's a lesson off. I like that. Let me ask you, you're in the middle of writing an exam, and you get a buzz on the wrist. You're participating in the study. You're 2 hours into a 3-hour exam. Are you happy to get the buzz on the wrist?
No.
Why not? It disturbs you. Disrupts your thinking. By the way, your conversation has revealed the 3 criteria that were used in this study. Early on, you said relevance. Engagement is the degree of relevance to the learner, not to the teacher. Does the child see relevance or meaning in what they're learning? 2, are they actively or passively involved? And 3, does it require a high level of concentration? Those are the 3 criteria used. Relevance, degree of active learning by the learner, and degree of concentration required in the learning. I'm more deeply engaged if I have to think, pause about this, actively engage with this. So I want to set that up. By the way, as we work through, just keep an eye on the 4 that you've listed and see how well do those align to, are they about being active, about relevance for kids, about having kids think about what they're doing? And I want to move into, so we want to look at this, because we can look at social engagement. When you look at what goes on at ISP, there's different types of engagement. There's being engaged in all the various clubs and activities, there's being engaged within the community. We can be engaged socially. We're focusing today on being engaged educationally. And the word engage comes from the French meaning to commit to. So when we talk about being engaged, it's to commit to learning, to want to learn. Okay? So when we look at that, I want to look at what does this mean? And in our work, we've developed a taxonomy of engagement that looks like this, as we're thinking about this. That you were engaged in I can give you a task. By the way, I can give you a worksheet. And if you are filling in my worksheet, you are technically engaged. And by the way, you might be engaged because I want to keep my marks up, I want to keep the teacher happy, I don't want to take this home. There's a variety of reasons. But notice I could just be compliant. Does that make sense? So I'm still engaged, but we would argue that's a low level of engagement. Okay, so we're talking about depths of engagement. By the way, down here is like Ferris Bueller's Day Off, or it's disengaged. If you're sleeping in class, if you're not in class, you can't be engaged if you're not present. Okay? But I could be merely compliant. And by the way, sometimes teachers really like these kids. I give you a task, you shut up and you do it, and you hand it in. I'm bored out of my mind, but I'm doing it because I want to keep on the good side. Okay, so now our argument is each level above will subsume the level below. In other words, if I could teach a lesson in a way you find interesting, you're more likely to be willing to complete that task. Does that make sense? If I can get you interested, you're probably more willing to do. I want you to know, though, you're not necessarily thinking here. I can teach a really fun lesson on mummification. It'd be really cool. And I got your attention, but you passively listened to me talk about mummification. Okay? What if I can show you value? That you'll actually use it. You mentioned the math. Well, if I can show you that this math actually has, you will need to use this one day, then I'm more likely to be interested in it. I'm more likely to be willing to do it. But still up to here, I haven't got you thinking. Because I could stand up in front, convince you of that this math will be used one day down the road. I did a very convincing job. I presented my lesson in a very interesting way, but you still thoughtlessly filled in a worksheet. Okay? We want to bump it up where engage kids in meaningful challenges. Challenge me to think, to solve problems, so I have to make the decisions in a way that I can see value. So these still matter. And ultimately, our goal in education should be to have a transformative impact on kids. That as a result of being in your class, I see the world differently, I interact differently in the world. Teaching a 5-year-old to read is a transformative act. Changes their world. Teaching a child to think about the past in different ways could be transformative. This should, by the way, I want to suggest to you, I think very few individual lessons are transformative. It's the cumulative effect of what we do over time in schools. It's really hard to have one lesson that just changes. That's the power of this ongoing exploration that kids do. But that we think should be our goal in education. And I want to just touch on, this is just another way of showing the same, and this was just kind of looking at, science fair or history essay. A science fair could be done, I'm willing to do. It's a part of our grade, so I have to make sure I get it done and get it in on time because I don't want my mark to suffer. That's being compliant. If I bump up, I picked a controversial topic that has me hooked. I'm weighing evidence because I'm trying to make a decision about the ethics of this or whatever it might be. Working on my science fair project has me thinking about my actions, reaffirming my beliefs. It's got me thinking more deeply. So this is what we want to play with, is how do we play up in this area? By the way, not ignoring this. I never want to say to teachers, if you have a field trip, the kids, you know the field trip. Arnie, tell me, what's a field trip kids love to do?
Oh, wow, there's so many. I mean, they're going to visit other countries, or they have week without walls at school where they're going to farm to table.
Okay. By the way, I want you to know, I can have one of those field trips. I love this. Our kids love it. We do it every year. But I could be doing it here. Mm-hmm. They were interested, but did we make them think? Mm-hmm. Right? Maybe we got them to see that farm to table matters and where our food comes from. How do I frame it so that not only did you enjoy it, because I don't want to lose this. I want kids to, their eyes to open up, their jaws to drop, them be excited, but I want them to have to think about how that impacts. So our goal should always be to say, what are those activities we do with kids that they love so much? And can we ratchet them up so the thinking is deeper as a result of, and not lose that. So that's kind of where we're going to go and take a little bit of a look at this. As I said, this is where we want the thinking is in the challenge, the collaboration, and the creativity. These other parts of ISP's principles of learning, they reside here. You want kids to engage creatively, it means they're solving a problem in an innovative way. They're thinking deeply, they're putting their heads together. That takes place here. Down here, I don't need to do these things. I'm being compliant. I really don't have to do the others. I want to show you, I always like to weave a little Canadian content into when I speak. I'm going to show you a video, and I want to ask you, do you think these children were education engaged based on what I've been telling you? And I need to give you a little bit of context. This is a video shot on a reserve in northern Ontario called Grassy Narrows. The sad part of it is for the last 40 years their water has been poisoned by mercury from mines in the area. The government just does little to clean it up. So it's a very difficult life for them. But they sent a mobile music lab onto the reserve, and the children participated in creating, performing, recording this song. So this is the children from Grassy Narrows. And I want to, where would they be on our taxonomy of engagement?
Let's work to show our pride. Keep us safe, keep us free, like it used to be. Don't wanna be tied down. We find love where we're from and beat against the drums. It's a beautiful sound.
From the ground up, we'll find the path home. Feel pulled by the sun, wish I can go. We learn from the past, now we can grow. We're promised a chance that the plans show. Go big, go far, though I know limits. I wanna see change, so my soul lives it. They cut down the trees, while we blow kisses. Defend our home while they dismiss us.
It feels like home to me. It feels like home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say home to me. Don't be afraid when you're falling in fast. There's something in the unknown. I held on to my culture, it's been calling me back. There is a story of hope. Winds of change, long ago. Hear the chants, far and low. Our voices cried out for rain. Then it rained, brought us life, gave us faith, gave us sight. To see that we shall remain.
Let your spirit soar as far as you can. Try not to be reminded by the scars from the past. Rise from the ruins, keep protecting the land. Don't take it for granted, can't neglect what we have. Stand together as a nation, express what we feel. True conversation, address what is real. Connected to the land, we are one with each other. This is our home to discover.
It feels like home to me. It feels like home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me.
Gotta stay on point like the fastest arrow. Bring hope to the people of grassy narrows. One piece in the land, can't go back to battles. It's fire in action, casting shadows. From old to the new, let us show you the truth. Light up the path, there's a glow in the youth. Bruise you to the world, this is where we live. So let the journey begin.
It feels like home to me. Tashko and Diane. It feels like home to me. It feels like home to me. Tashko and Diane. It feels like home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me. Sometimes it's hard to find the words to say you're home to me.
So I have three questions I want you to take a minute and discuss. Where would that experience for the children be on my, I mean, they're at least here because they produced it, so they're at least willing to do. From here to Transformed, what potentially was the impact of that for them? Secondly, what are the different ways that they could have engaged, if I use that, how were they engaged in terms of production, in terms of the construction of, and as a school, what different subjects might have come, how was that an interdisciplinary opportunity? So those three questions. Start with, where would that be? Do you think, on my engagement taxonomy, how high up would that get? how many different subjects were integrated? How many different roles might there be for kids to engage with? I'll just give you a couple of minutes to share a thought on that. Martin, do you mind if I call on you? When I was walking by, I heard you say, and I'd love to hear, that at least for some of those kids, transformative. Where would other kids be if it wasn't transformative? Would they... I mean, I think you saw some of the kids were really central in that, and some were more in the background, which we'll talk about. So some are here. Is everyone at least here, or some down here? What was your thought about... Some were here. Where were others? They could be all over? Okay. By the way, part of this raises the question, well, it would depend on if I filled in the background and I said, well, the song was constructed by the kids, you know, the videoing was done by the kids, the sound editing was done by the kids. If we knew that many of the students had roles that you maybe just don't see, then we might be able to argue that they're more up here. So I'm just saying, as a school, as a teacher, we think about, do I write the song and have kids learn to sing it, and I teach them to sing it, and they simply sing it back? We're actually down here then. But if they're constructing the lyrics, if they're constructing the music, if they're making the decisions about the editing of the video and what to zoom in on, you know, when that little boy was sitting on the snow, like, that was a really nice shot of the white, and you know, if they're making those decisions, we could argue it's here. So we need to know a bit more, but I want, you know, as we plan our things, how do we allow the kids to be guided by us, but they're making the decisions? So they're infused. I was mentioning this table, by the way, about 4 months after the video was finished. Had 500,000 hits on YouTube. And last year, the children were brought down from the reserve to perform in Toronto at the 150th birthday. So for certainly a group of them, it's had a huge impact. How many different subjects might have been involved in that, or could have potentially been? I heard you guys talking a bit about how many different subjects?
We were talking about that because they could be more. There were quite many subjects involved.
Yeah.
But they could be more, like for example, history, because
Yeah.
we could see what they are losing, how did it look like.
Okay.
That there could be also culture.
Yeah.
So science, yeah, you know, it could be
Yeah.
the native language. That's a pity because they are
Yeah.
losing the language.
And you heard some of it being used in the song?
Just a
So,
little bit.
yeah.
The whole verse.
Yeah.
Verse.
But what I'm hearing you say, language, culture, history, sport, drama, music. Like, this is an opportunity for a truly interdisciplinary approach to explore, to write, to create, to edit, and all of those. So I wanted to show you that just as an example of where we might be able to go. And then I want to suggest to you that in our teaching, sometimes, you know, we focus on the task, like that was a really engaging task. But I want to suggest, if we really want engaged learners, we want to be thinking about it in a number of ways. We want to look at engagement through social emotional security, that we are in this together, that we are learning in a safe place and we're contributing to that. Through inquiry, some of you talked when I asked you earlier, what does it mean when does learning stick? That opportunity to explore. Through the nature of the assessment. Assessment's not just some thing that happens to me at the end of learning and I get stressed about. Assessments can inspire. They can be exciting for kids. And through our daily instruction. Like, how am I teaching on a daily basis that has you actively engaged? Not passively listen for 3 weeks and then actively do a project at the end. How do we ensure that engagement is running through daily instruction, through rich assessments, through kids allowing to explore? And one of the pieces I just wanted to share that I've been playing with a little bit, I've been creating this idea for 20 years or so. I've explored areas of authentic assessment, and that's lots of conversation about the authentic assessment. But authentic assessment tends to focus on the product or performance kids create. Okay, so that's this axis. And I call this my fake to real learning. So down here is what I think kids perceive as fake. Would you agree, as parents, writing tests is what school makes kids do? It's not life. Is that fair? So I have to get ready for this test because school makes me write tests. But when I get out of here, how many of you have written very many tests lately? Well, I'm not saying we won't write a driver's test or to become in a trade you will write a test. But I'm guessing testing isn't part of your daily routine, right?
Unless you go in a different context. It's a verification of something before you land.
Okay. And then it becomes more, yeah. By the way, this is meant to be a continuum, and I want us to think about, what are the kinds of tasks that we have kids do that have greater, and many of you mentioned the real, the authentic, the seeing the connection to life beyond. So that's the authentic assessment, and there's lots of things go on. I think 2 years ago when I was here, there's a wonderful art exhibit. By the way, that gets to my next axis. Because I think often things happen in schools. My fake reel up here is, who's the purpose or audience? Why are you having me do this task? Because I need to generate a mark. Well, I think there are more powerful reasons to encourage kids to do work that gives them an authentic reason, that we're going to showcase the artwork, that we're going to perform the video, that there are authentic reasons, that we're going to publish the work. The writing we're doing is not just so a teacher can mark it. By the way, notice my audience here. If the only person who sees the work is the teacher, versus what if a broader audience? What if we're bringing a community? If we can get work out to the community, I think you find kids' eyes light up. It stops being about what's my mark and it starts being about, I want to do well in front of. Okay? Watch kids at a concert, a music concert. How many of them are looking to their teacher and saying, what's my mark? No, I want to perform well. When kids are playing sports, right? An authentic context, it stops being about the mark and it starts being about, I want to produce something I'm proud of because I'm sharing this publicly. Right? So I want to think about, I put a few in here, just to give you a couple of quick examples. Grade 5 class I was working with, they were learning about 3D prisms, or 3D shapes, 3D prisms. And the teacher went and she took pictures, she showed kids chocolate bars. And she said, what do you notice about the shape of most chocolate bars in their packaging? What shape are most chocolate bars? They're rectangular prisms. Which one isn't? Notice how quickly, this is part of Toblerone's brilliance. As soon as you see that triangular shape, you know Toblerone. Whether it's a little one, a big one, that's the brilliance. So she went to the grocery store, took a video of the cereal aisle. What do you notice about all cereal boxes? Rectangular prisms. She said to the children, there's a new cereal being launched, and they need to get space on crowded shelves and get their cereal to stand out. So your challenge is to design a new cereal box that will get the cereal noticed, but it has to ship easily. You can't increase shipping costs. It has to stock well at home and in stores, and you have to be able to pour easily from it. And the children began to play with 3D shapes and to design a new cereal box. Now, I love that, but I put it down here. Why? So that's authentic. Well, how come I put it here?
There's no audience.
Yeah. The kids brought them in, they were done. They sat on the table. The teacher eventually marked them and sent them home. And I thought, what a missed opportunity. What if we would have brought in, I don't know, some parents who are in marketing, or sent it out to a company and said, which of these do you think best? Like, what if kids knew that others will see your product? You would up their interest in wanting to make sure they're doing a good job. Right? Grade 1 class I was working with, they were learning about what you used to be able to buy with 10 cents. So the teacher took them to a senior's home, and they interviewed seniors about what they used to buy for 10 cents when they were young. The children came back in grade 1, they drew pictures and wrote a sentence about each thing you could buy with 10 cents. And when they were done, their book, they went back and read it to the seniors. Just love the fact you're going back to share this with seniors. It really mattered that they had a good book to share with seniors. One of the children wrote, I used to buy a cigar for 10 cents. Unless it was Cuban, then it was $1. So I think the filtering could have been a little better. By the way, if you've seen the movie School of Rock, probably the best example of real learning. I'm not sure you want to hire him as a teacher, not the best teacher in the world. But those kids had a real purpose, a real audience. They all contributed. So trying to play in this area, if we want deep engagement, where kids see that the work I'm doing matters, it has value, it's authentic, and if it's really mattering, then others should see my work, not just do it for the class and take it home. So finding ways to do that, and I think there are lots of small ways. I had a teacher say, I used to have kids write a chapter review when we were reading a novel study, and they would have to write me a review. I'm going to have them blog instead. I thought, beautiful. Technology just gave you an audience. You could blog out in each chapter what's happening and get others to read your blog. So there are lots of ways we can play with that. I want to move to the instruction level briefly. So that's the bigger picture, but I want to show you one of the things we were talking about, I think it was Monday here, and working with teachers. We call these launches. What are ways that I can launch learning right off the bat and have kids excited to start to respond? So this was a class that was learning about human body systems. respiratory system, digestive system, and so on. And they started by showing a clip from Guardians of the Galaxy. If you've seen the movie, you know Groot. And they asked, is Groot more plant-like or more animal? And the kids had to take a position, way more animal, somewhat more plant, or way more plant. Where would you be? By the way, the beauty of this, in the first Guardians of the Galaxy, they say, we don't know what Groot is. So there isn't a right answer. You have to be able to argue. As kids learned about the respiratory system, they would rewatch a short clip and they'd say, wait a minute, but he has a mouth. And he must breathe, because and they'd start to they'd learn about the digestive system. Is there any evidence that he has a digestive system? As they were learning, they were debating every day. So this launch helped to engage kids at the daily level. Having a class debate, we use this with the teachers the other day. If I were to ask, any of you have teenagers or tweens, early teens? If I were to ask them, I'd like you to place, what are the leading factors contributing to childhood obesity? And you have to adjust. By the way, this is inspired by, you know when you go to a fair and you squirt the gun and you try to get your horse to race across? That's what inspired this for me. Where would kids put genetics? Is childhood obesity, is genetics plays a minimal, significant, considerable, or substantial role? What would kids say, like 12, 13, 14 years old?
My daughter would say substantial.
Okay, substantial, okay. How about lack of sleep? Minimal. How about too much sugar? Considerable, okay. Playing video games? Minimal, okay. Sounds like what they want to believe. Eating fast foods? Okay. Lack too little physical activity. By the way, you'll notice we have this set up on a board. Kids come, they slide it across. This is a quick diagnostic. Tell me why you think that. Every day we learn. Okay, given your new learning, anyone think we should adjust these? Now what are you thinking? Notice that it's a way every day to have kids engaged in using what you've learned to come back to our question, our central question. You'll notice what we're doing is we're not putting the question at the end. I'm going to teach you all this stuff, and then at the end I'm going to ask you which factor plays the biggest role. I'm going to ask you at the beginning, and we're going to debate and discuss and change our minds and explore, and it's a way to have kids actively involved throughout their learning. Or one other, we were talking about this. If we ask children, we're going to be learning about an ancient civilization, and you're going to be creating a museum exhibit of some of the greatest innovations in human history. The problem is you only have room for 5 artifacts to put in your exhibit, and we're going to learn about 10 or 12. Each day, we'll learn about another way that humans have innovated to make life more comfortable, and you'll have to decide whether you want to keep that one or not. Okay? So we might start off with saying, here are 4 innovations. You can have 3 of them. By the way, without any teaching, which one do you think children would maybe not pick? And right now, it's okay that I don't really know what they are, but just by looking at them, which one do you think kids would maybe not take? The pot? Yeah. Okay. By the way, then I might say to kids, remember, we want to look at which ones best reflect human innovation, and we would start teaching about this is the Nilometer that measured the flooding of the Nile on a yearly basis, so you could plan in advance. The pot is actually a Chinese earthquake detector. Each dragon holds a ball in its mouth, and when a tremor hits, for the direction from which the tremor is coming, that dragon would drop the ball into the frog's mouth as an early warning system. The Roman aqueducts, the planting terraces at Machu Picchu in Peru. As kids learn, they might go, oh, wait a minute, actually, I think I do want to keep that one. That's really interesting. Okay, then which one are you giving back to me? Notice every day I've got kids having to make decisions. Is this a great piece of innovation, and why do you think that? By the way, the next day when we look at more, and then we come in a third day, and you already have 5, and you only have room for 5, but now I bring in some really interesting innovations, and I want that one in my exhibit. Okay, you have to give me something back. Okay? And you have to be able to justify. You know the book Wonder? So this was the way we worked with the book Wonder, but this is called a value line. And the teacher every day would ask children, we're going to read one more chapter, and you have to decide 2 important events in each chapter as we read them. We would define important. Important is something that helps me understand the characters better, moves the story along in some way. So we give them some criteria. The children had to pick 2 events every chapter, but they then decided, did it have a positive impact on Wonder's life or a negative impact? So if it's very positive, we'll put it way up here. If it's somewhat positive, somewhat negative, or very negative. Children would pick an event and they would talk about when these things happen, and they were plotting the story. And overall, they could step back from the story and go, is a story of triumph or disappointment? Well, he certainly, when he started school, there were some tough times, and he struggled, and his dog died on him here. But overall, I see it going up, and I think ultimately it's triumphant. Despite the setbacks, they would build an argument. But every day we had kids discussing and debating, was this a good day or not such a good day for Wonder, and why do you think that? And so they were engaged in constructing their response to it and building a view overall.
And I love that because they see that in their own lives.
Yes.
They get good days, bad days, and it's the overall. It's beautiful.
And building some criteria. And by the way, notice, and sometimes that was like the best day ever. Yeah. That was pretty good. It wasn't as good as yesterday, but it was pretty good. And getting them to have those. By the way, the other thing is perspective, brought out here. What if I change the lens? So that day for Wonder was here. How about his mother? Would she have said it was an equally good day, or was that a stressful day? So we can look at it through the lens of perspective. So these are our structures that we've been talking about here at the school, about how we just put them in so that not only are the bigger tasks engaging kids, but these are engaging. Remember I said educational engagement is getting you to commit to thinking about. That's at the instruction level, the daily level. The other tasks are at a higher level. Now I want to just take a minute and just touch on a couple of things. One of the big pushes in education is digital. We have to put all this technology in classrooms. And I just want to frame a few comments around, I love this Alice in Wonderland quote, when Alice falls down the rabbit hole and she asked me, would you tell me please which way ought I go from here? Well, it depends a good deal on where you want to get to. Well, I don't care much where. Well, then it doesn't matter which way you go. If we don't have a clear sense of where we want to go with learning, with education, then it doesn't really much matter what we do. I was working with an elementary school in Ottawa in Canada, and I had some very frustrated teachers come to a session. Not frustrated, they're frustrated with their school because their their principal had bought 8 3D printers, 8 3D printers for a small elementary school, and nobody was using them. And she said, okay, well I have to justify these printers. Every teacher has to print something by June, right? And that's why they were frustrated. They go, well, I don't need to print from it. I said, well, she fell down the rabbit hole. I mean, you went and bought 3D printers because they're the latest technology out there, but you didn't think about how are they advancing the learning that we want to affect. Was that the right technology? By the way, I'm not knocking 3D printers. It's just, it seems to me, you went out and bought the technology, but you didn't think about how the technology was going to impact the learning. So we want to be careful about how we're ensuring that technology is impacting the learning we want. By the way, this is just recently published by Sam Weinberg, who's doing some work around, and I think you'll find this interesting, about how we assess credibility of sources. Because in a digital world, one of the big issues we have, so much stuff is out there, but how do we know what to trust? And here's what he found out. By the way, he asked this the question he asked: how do expert researchers assess credibility of information? So they used 3 groups. They used fact checkers, historians, and undergraduate students at Stanford. And they found, notice that fact checkers were the fastest and most accurate, while historians and students were easily deceived by unreliable sources. That shocked me. Told you I come from a history background. Fact checkers do a better job at more quickly assessing credibility and more accurately, and historians tend to get caught more. Now, I think the why is really, really interesting. Notice what he said. Historians sleuth for a living, and he said, essentially, historians you try to read a document deeply. Okay, so you get a document and you read deeply. I love this. He said, fact checkers read laterally. Historians read vertically. So fact checkers, when they get a fact, they quickly pull up 4 or 5 other sources and they look across and go, okay, this seems to be consistent, or this seems to be an anomaly compared to the other. They do a very quick, notice they're more efficient, and they decide, okay, does this fit with the general trend? Historians tend to go deep with a single source. And because today I can give my website what sounds like a credible name, I can do all kinds of things and make it look believable. And it just struck me as I was looking at this, notice in contrast, historians and students read vertically. They would stay with the original site and try to go deep into the original site, but just get drawn into it. And I'm mentioning this to you because I think for our kids, teaching them in a digital world, does this fit with what others credible sites are saying? As opposed, by the way, I think in classrooms, we still probably do a lot of read one document closely and deeply when we probably need to situate it within a context. That's just, shifting our thinking about, yeah, but I wasn't trained that way when I was doing my graduate work in history. I wasn't trained to read laterally, I was trained to read vertically. Well, it's a different world, and we have to be thinking about how we engage with that world. I'm just going to leave you the last couple of thoughts. I don't know if any of you are familiar with SAMR. So SAMR stands for Substitution, Augmentation, Modification, Redefinition. And the idea is when we add technology in the classroom, substitution, that textbook I used to lug around is now on my iPad. But it's still a textbook. It's just a digital version of my textbook. But I still passively interact. Does that make sense? I'm reading it just like I used to read. I'm not doing anything different. Augmentation. Well, that textbook we used to have now has a video embedded, so that picture now comes to life. But I still consume it. I don't interact with it. I just watch it. Modification allows me to do things with it that I couldn't have done before. Redefinition, whole new tasks that were unimaginable. I just want to offer a caution. A little more Canadian content. This is Chris Hadfield, the Canadian astronaut. You may remember Chris Hadfield because when he was in outer space, he was the one singing the David Bowie song from space with his guitar and so on. And in Canada, at one point, he was beamed into schools across Canada, and kids were brought to auditoriums and so on, and they could Skype him in and they could have a conversation. And that's really interesting. So when I look at the SAMR, where would I place that? We can now have kids talking with an astronaut from space, in real time. And most teachers say, well, that's redefinition. You could never have done that 20 years ago. And I asked, and what if the question kids ask, what color are your socks today? Like, is it possible that, sure, you can do something you could never have done, but I haven't deepened the thinking? By the way, is it possible to be out here where I've got good, rich thinking going on, but I'm not using any technology? Sure. If we're going to use technology in the class, again, I want to play up here where that technology is allowing me to push thinking and have kids engage creatively in ways I couldn't have done before. It's enriching their thinking. If I'm playing here, I'm still doing the same thinking. The guy has to be in space, but he could have been around the corner. Like, I wouldn't have known. If the questions I'm asking aren't richer, then we haven't really changed learning. We've just changed the vehicle by which we deliver it. I want to bring these two together. Like, by the way, I'm not knocking SAMR. I'm just saying let's be careful that we don't just have kids doing things that are really cool that we couldn't. Yeah, but are they thinking anymore? There's another model I'll leave you with to think about, and that's called TPAC. So 1986, a researcher, Lee Schulman, published a study called PCK. So it stands for Pedagogical Content Knowledge. So it looked like this. His argument was, you can know all the content. You could have a PhD in chemistry. That doesn't mean you're a good teacher. Is that fair? You know your material, but you don't know how to teach it to others. You could be the greatest pedagogue in the world. You still don't want me teaching senior chemistry. Because if I know nothing about chemistry, we'll just blow up the classroom collaboratively. But if I don't know chemistry, you probably don't want me teaching your chemistry class despite my good pedagogy. So Lee Schulman's early research was that powerful teaching happens at the intersection of knowing content and knowing good teaching. We need both. You need to know how to teach, but you need to know about what you're teaching. 2006, this study was republished where we added technological knowledge. And what I find powerful is it's about learning at the intersections. It's about saying, make sure that kids have the content knowledge they need. They're learning it through powerful approaches to learning, and that technology is being used to enhance the pedagogy or give them access to content they couldn't. That's where real powerful learning happens. Notice I can play here, but the content's missing. I can play here, but the pedagogy's missing. How is technology allowing me to access information I couldn't have accessed, to engage with information that I couldn't have engaged with in that way, to collaborate in ways I couldn't have in the past? That's where we're going to get to really powerful learning. So I'm going to just finish. I wanted to bring you back to, because I kind of made brief reference to the principles here at the school. When you look now at the placemat that we began with and some of the comments I've made, and you look at the principles and how do they stack up, that how important, in fact, I think someone had curiosity maybe number one on their list as I walked around. That importance of curiosity for deep engagement, because curiosity means that it matters to me. Otherwise, I'm not curious about it. But they know what they're learning and why it's important. That's the relevance piece. That learners know how they're going to go further, that they're able to move their work forward. They understand that the relevance and rich challenges. By the way, notice when I kept saying, is Groot more plant or animal? I asked that at the beginning. Not only do I have relevant, rich challenges, they're persistence, because I keep coming back. We have an iterative approach. As you learn, we're going to go deeper, we're going to revisit that. That they're connecting those ideas over time. They're applying it in a variety of ways. And I mentioned the importance of engagement through safety. Like all of these fit into that. What does it mean to deeply engage kids? Well, these principles are at the core. And we want to add to this. So if these are the principles, what are the practices that bring those to life? I think within a couple of minutes. Anyway, I hope that was helpful to you in some ways, and ways that as you engage with your children, and keep that word in mind as parents, when we engage, it's not have fun, but to engage them in meaningful conversation. So thanks so much for your participation.
Thank you, Garfield. As you can see, it's always such a good fit, and he always makes us think and continue. And so thank you for coming to think with us. Given the time, we will stay here. Garfield has another half hour for any questions, so you feel free, but I know that some people need to leave. Jay, our librarian, has an offer on hand, so I'm going to let her say a couple of words, and then we'll let you go. But you're free to stay and ask some questions and talk with Garfield further after the session. So Jay.
Just briefly, after the last presentation, there were several people who asked for more books and connections to what they were learning. So we brought some things in today that you can check out from here, or you can come to the library at another date and look through them. This is some stuff related to inquiry and thinking about education, but also a lot of great stuff just about parenting that's new in the library. And of course, we want you to know what's available. So if you'd like to look at that on your way out and pick something up, I can check it out to you right as you leave. Thank you.
Again, thank you for being partners in learning with us, and have a great day. But again, feel free to stay and talk further with Garfield. Thank you. Bye-bye.